Buddy Rizer, welcome to the bar.
Wow, it's been a long time since you and I have been in a bar together, but it's an honor to be here.
Well, honest to God, it's a long time since I've been in a bar, but we've created our own here in Enniskerry, County Wicklow, and Dublin, and we have this on the wall in honor of your good self.
I really appreciate that. Younger days, right there.
Well, it sort of looks like a different vintage and time and attire, but I think, as we said just before we came on air, your eyes are the same, and that's all that really matters. It's the window to the soul.
That's right. The eyes and the smile, they throughout the years all remain the same.
And this new look, tell me about the beard, because it's Bear Grylls stuff.
Well, I'll tell you, when this all happened and we went into lockdown mode about March 16th, I kind of said to myself, I'm not shaving until I go back to the office. And I don't know that I knew we would be here this long, but yeah, it's starting to look a little ZZ Topish, I think.
Well, there's something and a great link into what you have behind you, because the first thing I saw when we connected up was you got golden disc on the wall.
Yeah.
And knowing as I do that you have a great backstory career, I'm thinking that that is connected with a previous career.
It is. I think a lot of people know that I spent the first 30 years of my adult life on the radio, working at the radio stations in DC and in Baltimore. And as a music director and as a program director and as disc jockey, you get the opportunity to help with the launches of albums and kind of the strategy behind albums and those kinds of things. And throughout that time, I really enjoyed that part of it and ended up with about 27 gold and platinum records. And I've been rotating them behind me just to kind of give everybody something new to see every time that they talk with me on a video chat. I do want to show you one other thing, if I may.
Yeah.
I've gotten back into my vinyl records. So every day I've been listening to a new album, and in honor of our conversation, I got out the U2 record today.
You know, it links beautifully into a conversation I had yesterday where we were trying to talk about the digital front line that's running in parallel, supporting the health front line. And I was asked a straight question, and it was, what has kept you most sane over the last 6 to 8 weeks? And in my case, I said Spotify.
Yeah.
And the aspect of it that really I love, that I hadn't fully appreciated it, is it links the genres. You obviously have a computer brain where you have everything siloed and you have all the different artists in your mind and you can link. But for the rest of us, we need, if we like Stevie Wonder, guess what? We need 10 other artists that sound a bit like him. And now I'm listening to stuff like, Gladys Knight and the Pips. And I'm listening to sort of that Smokey Robinson, which I wouldn't have listened to. It's wonderful to have music. And in your case, obviously, the vinyls are wonderful.
Yeah, for me, music has been a big way that I've gotten through all this. And, you've heard of a photographic memory. I have a phonographic memory. I can remember almost every track from every album, and I've got tens of thousands of albums in my basement. So, for me, every day I go down and I kind of riffle through the albums and I pick one. I go, yeah, that's what I want to listen to today. And it's a wide variety of things, and it's been a lot of fun for me. I've really enjoyed kind of reconnecting with my music during this time.
And it connects you. It's an interesting thing because there's one particular song. My mother wasn't a big singer, nor was she a big listener of music, but she loved one particular song. And every time I hear it, I think of her and all that is her and the periods of time that she would have sang that song. It's a great thing. And I was out walking just before this, and it was interesting you have the vinyl there, because the last time I listened to one particular song, I listened to hear John Hall and Oates. There
Hmm.
was always on the vinyl a skip, and on the Spotify there wasn't. But in my brain, I said, "Oh, that's wrong. It doesn't have the skip."
Yeah, waiting for the skip or waiting for the pops, waiting for the scratches. Yeah,
Waiting for the pops and the scratches. So
yeah.
you mentioned when this all started, just in mid March or so. Have you learned anything particular about yourself? I mean, you and I are just over 21, so we're not meant to learn or too many. Have you learned anything about yourself in particular since you've gone into the lockdown?
I think I've learned that I'm not great at telling. I miss being around people. I miss the energy of people. I miss, you know, being able to laugh and those things. And we try to do it, based on, the Zoom meetings and everything. But for me, I get energy people around me. And the other thing is that I notice that I'm probably working more because instead of having to get in a car and drive to work and then drive home, I get up in the morning, I walk, instead of turning left into the kitchen, I turn right into my office and I work until the day is done. And so for me, I think I need a little bit of a regulator on myself, and I think going to the office kind of helps me with that. How about you?
Similar. I'm missing people. I'm missing the energy of people. And it's not the big stuff, it's the little stuff. Learning about fishing, learning about crocheting,
Yeah.
learning about the sort of smaller stuff, that nuances. Whereas this is okay, but we tend to get straight into the old work. We tend to be having another
Right.
Zoom call in an hour. We're getting better at it as people get more comfortable with it. But I think you're right. I think that I miss people. Um,
Mhm.
and I think what it's helping technology and the what we're involved in data and data centers. I mean, I cannot only imagine 10 years ago, 5 years ago,
Yep.
if we hadn't this form of communication and entertainment and dialogue, now we would have a pandemic of mental insanity, because you know this isolation plays tricks with people, even the
Yeah.
semi-sane of us.
Yeah, and listen, when you start to think about the way that we're able to do this today, and you think about the role that data centers, and of course, with Dublin being such a huge data center location, and Loudoun County being such a huge data center location, for us, business has actually accelerated. We have 8 data center fast track programs right now through data centers. This time last year, we only had 4. So for us, this has actually accelerated because the data centers, they need to be able to keep up with this demand that's being created on a daily basis.
Absolutely. And you know what we found lately? Your cluster, our cluster, with where there's change, you'll always have alternative views, and you'll always have a louder voice detracting from the change. And the industry itself haven't felt that an awful lot to shout and be proud about, because people have a view of the data centers as being these just very large consumers of energy not doing anything. What happened when we had our lockdown announced was there was two types of workers announced: healthcare workers, digital infrastructure workers, essential workers.
That's right.
And the sense of purpose that these people have suddenly found, that they are now recognized as the manufacturers and the custodials of the tools and services that is maintaining the current norm. And there's a real increased sense of purpose,
Yeah.
which I think is wonderful, because they've had a lot of dark days. In my opinion, they've had a lot of dark days when they've had the finger pointed at them, and I think that's very encouraging for the industry.
Yep. It is, and you know, one of the first things we did when this all happened in mid-March is I brought on board Philip Sandino, who you know, of course, used to work at Raging Wire, used to work at Dominion Energy, and asked Philip to kind of coordinate the industry and to do things like, you know, make sure that we understand how we get to work because we are essential employees, and how do we make sure that we're all being safe and that we're sharing information. And so that's been a big thing for us because, you know, we have such a cluster of data centers with different operators that we thought that that was an essential step to make sure that they were able to do the business they needed to do.
We did a great video. I'll send it on to you afterwards, where we got Interaction, Digital Realty now. We got Cyrus One. We got Equinix. We got other co-location guys. And we made a video. And the video basically is where each one of them says something like, this is where your Netflix, we thank the health workers, we thank this. And they said a little piece, and then they basically handed into the camera a router, and the other guy took it out in the other data center and said, oh yeah, I pick up the, and what it did was visually it gave people a sense that these data centers aren't islands, same way as we're not islands, they're all interconnected. Data on your smart device may go to 10 of these, and we used it as a way both for them to be more mindful that they may be brand X or brand Y, but they're just a cluster of community. Yep. And secondly, it got people thinking, okay, so my Spotify doesn't just go to one server and one center, it goes to multiple. And that's where the whole disaster recovery comes from. And it gets dialogue going, because I think this industry, you and I have spoken about it. I always think I work on the industry. I don't work in it. You do the same, right? And one of the things that I would say to them always is, really, if you come at me with a PUE as an opening discussion, I want to buy the car. Don't tell me about the spark plug. Please. Right. We'll get there. It's important. Whereas now we're trying to encourage them to talk about Netflix. We're trying to talk to them about Spotify, about Google Class, or something that people now realize if they didn't have, they would have no formal anything, never mind the new norm. And some of them are coming our way, roaring and screaming.
Mm-hmm. Well, I tell you, for me, I always say, you know, let's get beyond the building, because that's where we hear a lot, right? I mean, we hear a lot about the buildings and they're big and they're this, they're that. But let's get beyond the building. Let's talk about the impact. Let's talk about the impact that it's having today on everyday life, on emergency communications and in business communications and in education and all of those things. Let's talk about that. Let's talk about how it is impacting and giving us a stable tax base that's enabling us to respond to the COVID-19 pandemic the way that a community should be able to do that. The fact that we've been able to give away millions of dollars in grants to small businesses that have been impacted and all those things, you know, really it's that impact that is the story. And like you said, it's more about what do they do than how they do it.
You're absolutely right. And again, this morning, just talking to a group of young graduates who have just graduated in Ireland from the aviation industry, would you believe? 6 months ago, they were looking into a very positive, very encouraged landscape. And now with the aviation industry, we're trying to encourage them to not to despair, that basic disciplines and skills that they have inherited and learned about mission criticalness has another industry in the infrastructure of data centers. And likewise, you and I would be the same. There's retail have an uncertain future. There's hospitality. They're the core skills of doing the right things in the right order with the right people. But what I was trying to encourage them to take away from my talk was there's two words in data center: data and center. Split the two and look at the power of the data. Look what the data is doing as part of this industrial revolution 4.0. I try to also then encourage them to look at any smart device that you see anywhere, has smart written in front of it, has a data center behind it. So it's only smart because of the box in front. So when you wax lyrical about the energy savings associated with the likes of the Nest thermostat, guess what? That energy saving in your house is directly related to the energy that's being used in a center. And this is where we start to get that discussion around, and we can have it now, is that we're at a wonderful situation where the data is the solution also to climate change. The actual,
There's no question.
the data itself. And that's a wonderful discussion to be coming into, rather than just looking at the gross energy usage. It should be across the whole linear path of the use of the data, to your point.
Yeah. And it does make a huge difference. And you start to think about how this data center industry has led the way on renewables, and the way that they have been, I always say they might use a lot of energy. They don't waste any energy. I mean, it's just not, that's not what they do. So it's important, and as we continue to evolve, and there's a lot of discussion where, will people come back to offices? Will people? They will. I mean, guys like you and I, we need that energy and we need that collaboration. We'll come back. But, it also shows that there are other ways to do business, that business has to continue, and we will continue to make sure that we're able to do these things. And you know what? The data centers play a huge role in that.
Even before we entered into the last 8 weeks, the word I was coming into this year using a lot my whole life was hybrid.
Mm-hmm.
Hybrid car, hybrid computing. And when I'm looking at this new work-life balance thing, it's going to be a hybrid of, let's say, I go to the office when I'm needed in the office, I work from home when I don't need it in the office. So there'll be this hybrid environment where, and what I love, and even the fact that you, after 30 years, decided to go from the music industry, which was your comfort zone, I guess, where you knew everybody, you knew where all the bodies were buried, and it would have been very happy and easy for you to see through your dotage. You then go and you decide, oh, what's the natural link for a disc jockey? I'll become head of an economic development group.
Yeah.
You were prepared to realize that you as a person needed to change for whatever reason, and we don't even need to get into it. A lot of those change resistance people in organizations that would say that can never be done with our industry. We could never have 30% of our people working from home. They've just had the rug taken right underneath them. And that's a great catalyst for change, because now we've a demonstrable evidence that, you know what? We did it.
Yeah. Yeah. And you've got to listen, you got to be growing, you got to be evolving, or you're going to get left behind. And none of us want that. I mean, you start to think about what is the opportunity that comes from this. And you and I are built from the same cloth. We're always looking to the future. We're always looking for opportunity in every situation. And you start to think about, what is the opportunity? How do we grow from this? How do we learn from this? And how do we evolve from this? And you go, you know what? There is always going to be a place for people and technology that continues to deliver. And that's really important for people to remember right now.
Yeah. And it's hard. What we're seeing as well, and maybe you're the same, is that the people that are getting it quickest are the board level people. Yeah. The board level people. They realize, wow, we're still operating at whatever we're operating. Why is that? Well, it's because of the adaptability of our people and the availability of tools to allow us to do it. You're sitting now, I guess, somewhere in Maryland, North Virginia.
Yeah, I'm in my home in Northern Virginia. Yes.
Yeah, and we are entering in Dublin here soon, phase 2 of our 5 phases. At the moment we can't go more than 5 kilometers. We can meet with 4 people. You can imagine I had a 4-person, really excited party last Friday. It was great with social distancing. Are you at a stage where you're allowed to go outside of your direct family? Are you on a planned
Yeah,
process?
we've actually just entered into phase one today. Um, and and so phase one opens up some of the restaurants and has a couple of the, with outdoor seating and with takeaway, and you can go get a haircut today with an appointment. And yeah, so phase one has just started. And one of the things that, and we talk about data, right? One of the things that I've been so proud of my community in is that they have done data driven analysis. They open when the data says it's safe to open. And that's important. That's a really important part of this, because listen, we all got sick of this, weeks ago. But if the data is telling us that it will, be long-term detrimental to our economic recovery and to our health, then it is important that we wait. So that data has been a big important part of this entire discussion.
Yeah, and that's why I was nearly referring to, we have another tsunami about to come along, which is data driven, which is the challenges of the climate change. And my sense is that even people who were detractors, um, they're now going to start looking at science. They're going to look at the data, and the data is telling us. My child, I have a young 11-year-old here, and earlier in the year, we've spoken about it. We set up an initiative for a community building initiative within the data center people called DCs for Bees, right?
Mm-hmm.
We spoke about it. And why do we set that up? Well, because, this community is great with bits and bytes and servers and stuff, but they also wanted a sense of purpose around the environment, something tangible that they could do. So the
Right.
DC for Bees. But Pearl, my youngest daughter, said to me, and what really stimulated me to get going was that, do you realize that I learned today that if things continue the way they are, Florida in the United States will have to go into the history books that they're currently in the geography books. And all the science and all the numbers hadn't had the same effect as that picture. And that's what you and I do a lot of. We take a lot of that and we try and picturize it. But she said it'll be underwater, so it'll be part of the history books. And it actually struck me. I said, yeah, God, that's powerful stuff. And the science behind it, then you can, once you get into that, oh, wow, yeah, why is that? And then you look at the science. I think more people are going to look at the science because, we believe more, except for the people who seem to want to blow up 5G towers. Have you got similar conspiracy theorists?
I haven't. We haven't been hit by that. I've read some of those stories in the news, but so far so good. I mean, I think that we've done a pretty good job of talking about the importance of communication and its impact on life. And so, I mean, listen, there's always going to be those that don't agree and don't want to understand, and you can't do much about that. And if a lifetime in public, in the public has taught me anything, is that you got to just do your best job, because you're not going to please everybody, and you shouldn't even try. You should do what you think is right and do the best job you can do. Base it on your experience and base it on the data, and let the other things kind of just go. And 9 times out of 10 you'll be proven right, maybe 99 out of 100.
But isn't it interesting? You used a word there called experience, and I heard recently that experience, when you get to the stage where you've got it, is actually just an accumulation of all the mistakes that you've made in the past.
Mm-hmm. You've never made mistakes, have you?
Not the same one over and over. I have made, oh, I think that's madness. Isn't that what Einstein or somebody said was a
Yeah.
madness? So is this the I'm sure there's more than one. You said about your music. You're now head of economic development in Loudoun County. Is there another coming? Is this it now? Are you gonna write a book? Are you gonna? Is there a book in the making? There must be something.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, I think that there's several things that I would still like to accomplish. First of all, uh, I love my job. I'm one of the few lucky people in life that has never one day had to go to a job that he didn't like. I
Well
mean,
done.
that's I'm blessed by that. Absolutely. And I am inspired in this job and want to continue to do this job for as long as I want to. But I'm also very lucky that if I decide not to do it anymore, I can do that too. But right now, I'm enjoying it. I do have a lot of writing that I want to do. I have a lot of storytelling that I want to do, and I've tried to take some time to do that every day during this, and try to capture as kind of a case study of how we've responded to this, and how not just we Loudon, but how we as a country have responded to this. Because if this can happen in 2020, it can happen in 2040, and it can happen. I've been spending the last couple of days going back and reading and watching documentaries on the 2008 and 2009 financial crisis, because I think that informs a lot of what we're going through today, and I think we're handling it better today. We know more today.
Yeah.
So I'm hoping that I can capture some of that, of how we've responded to this, that might be able to maybe impact the decision making of the people beyond us.
It's really extraordinary you say that, because I'm listening to a podcast at the moment with an Irish economist, and not a real numbers guy, a guy who tries to paint pictures. He's called David McWilliams. And what he's just done, and he only announced today, and I listened to it earlier, he's calling this next wave a pan session,
Mm.
because we had great depressions, we had pandemics, we had all of these, but we never had a recession or a depression brought about by a, a pandemic. So he's calling it a pan session. I'll keep you updated, because he's taking the best of the 2008 to 2010 recession, and he's taken some of the stuff, and it's sort of, it's like watching biological world and financial world to come out with some suggested paths out of it. But to me, what you've said, and probably what Dave McWilliams is, read.
Yeah.
Ignorance is nearly an option now. It was, when I was a kid, you were lucky to have Britannica Encyclopedia. If your mother and father were lucky enough to get you the thing, that was like, now we've Google. Now we have other forms of, you nearly suggest that ignorance is an option, would you?
Well, the thing with that, and absolutely, I mean, you can get the information, but you should read a variety of information, and not just get stuck in your own echo chamber.
Yeah.
Don't read the people that just think like you do. I mean, because that's dangerous. Read what other people think, and read what other opinions are, and that can help shape your opinion. Because if you're going to just sit there and only listen to people that think like you do, you're not growing. You're just not evolving at that point. So you've got to make sure that you're listening to other points of view.
Do you know, as two people who work on the data center industry, and like data and the power of data and all the rest, I'm going to tell you something that 3 months ago I decided, for that exact reason. I found I was going with my apps and stuff, that you can filter out so much stuff. I was going very deep in very narrow fields, very deep in very narrow. So the first step was, I decided that I would read the Sunday newspapers and Saturday newspapers from front to back. Why? Because I missed the day you'd flip over a page and you'd hear, Wicklow man catches the largest cod ever in the Irish Sea. And it's right beside it. And to your point, you're picking up bits and pieces of other information that catch your eye. Oh, that's interesting. And I felt I was missing that when I was going with my flip top or whatever, oh, I like that team and I like that player and I like that stock and I like that industry. And that's all that I was being fed. And this way, by reading the newspaper, where it's particularly local newspapers, which is a real mashup of everything from everywhere, I found that it was giving me, oh, I didn't know that particular flower came out that particular time in this particular location. So it's interesting what you're saying. It's sort of going back to the local newspaper, pick it up every so often, you'll really find out what the stew pot of your local community are doing. Is there three words that Buddy Rizer would, anybody watching this, whether you're of any age or any genre or any location, what's the three words right now that you're living by or likely to live by?
Well, that's a good one. I mean, I think that for me, it's learn, and it's write, and it's enjoy. If you can find ways to do those three things, I think you're setting yourself up. I mean, because you want to keep learning, you want to keep growing, you want to be able to. I mean, if I, like you said, if I was, content to be a disc jockey and now be a 50-year-old rock and roll disc jockey, that would have been fine. I mean, I could have made a living, but I really wanted to do something new. I want to write because I think that getting your ideas out, getting it on paper or into the cloud or wherever you're keeping it, I think that's important. And it informs not only you, but the future. And enjoy. It's easy for us to think about, all the things that are wrong in our world. But if we can't think about how we can take advantage of the time that we have, I've been practicing my guitar. I've been listening to vinyl music. I've been spending more time with the family, and all that has been a blessing. It's important. So, find that way to enjoy. So those would be my three words.
Well, and we didn't do much prepping of this, but it's extraordinary because I took my guitar out as well.
Ah, you want to play a song?
The green screen, but I got to the stage where I was able to play one of U2's song, my favorite U2 song, and what was really incredible was once I got past the stage of getting the calluses back in my fingers, it started to become such a great piece of fun again. But again, it teaches you got to do the hard yards. You got to do the hard yards. And what was stopping me from picking it up was, the pain in my fingers. And now I pick it up every day. And I'm even able to play the hard F. I worked hard on getting the long F. So it's amazing. Music is a great thing, and guitar and whatever else is a wonderful bind. Like, I mean, you picked your guitar up now. What's your favorite song?
Well, I've been playing a lot of Jimmy Buffett and a lot of Wilco. Do you know the band Wilco? Love the band Wilco, and I'm like you. The first thing was my fingers really hurt. They really hurt. And then the second thing was I thought my fingers had stretched because I can't do all the chords as well. So it's like you're trying to get your fingers into those right places. And
absolutely,
it's been a learning experience, man. It really has.
And it's wonderful because now my child has picked up the ukulele, the little one.
Oh, wow, that's awesome.
Yeah, and she's
awesome.
Because I'd forgotten my father was a singer, and you forget these things, but music stimulates music, sports stimulates sport, reading stimulates reading, and you're absolutely right. The situation that has driven us to where we are today is just horrible. It's horrific. It is what it is, though, and therefore you have to. And I'll tell you a little story about why I picked the guitar up. About 5 years ago, I read a book about a white-collar crime guy, and he was going to jail for tax evasion, and he was doing the time. He had to do the time, but he had an option. He could either pick up and learn a skill, learn to play in his case, I think it was the banjo, and look back at the time he was doing and say, that was the time I learned to play the banjo. or he could look back and say, that was the time I did 3 years in jail.
Mm-hmm.
And he chose that he was doing the time, and looking back then, well, that was the time I learned to play the banjo, and that's how he survived it. So you know, buddy, we could probably wax on for another 5 days. It's been great fun as always. You know, you're an interesting, the way you weave stories of today, tomorrow, the past, singing, the whole lot. It sort of gives us a sense that ultimately it doesn't really matter how big your car is. It really doesn't matter how big your house is. If you try and do the right things in the right order with the right people for the right reasons, peace of mind is something that you can probably arrive at without having to have everything material. And that's one of the other things I think people are hopefully arriving at. So thank you so much for joining us in Doheny and Nesbitt's. I was in Doheny and Nesbitt's with you physically
Yeah.
3 years ago, but thank you for coming to the virtual version of it that we've relocated.
Isn't that where we did the podcast when I was there?
We did a podcast in Doheny and
That's
Nesbitt.
right.
Now you're doing this, and we're using.
That's awesome.
It's just incredible. So thank you. Stay safe. You're the best of fun.
Thank you, my friend. It's always great to see you.